Hi, I'm going to talk about server-side ad insertion today. SSAI is server-side ad insertion for video on demand. It's also known as DAI for video on demand, and sometimes dynamic ad insertion is referred to live ad insertion as well. It's also known as just plain stitching. How does it work? Ad breaks are retrieved and inserted on the server side instead of the client, creating a seamless contextual playback experience for the user. Some of the key advantages are a seamless TV-like experience for the user, client-side player implementation, maybe less complex. There's typically less code to worry about, less complex SDKs to implement. Players can do less and focus on playback. With less CPU and network usage, it should have a significantly better user experience. This is a big deal when it comes to mobile, if you think about a user's mobile video playback experience. It also lowers the chance of buffering due to ad requests and processing. If that's happening on the client, there's a lot of overhead involved with that. And also, some app distributors are starting to recommend SSAI, Apple being one of them. SSAI doesn't mean 100% server-side. At Playback, there are still some things you need to do on the client. Occasionally, campaigns might have ad impression beacons that they require to fire off on the client side, or QoS beacons on the client side as well. There's playback timeline management that you'll still have to worry about in your players, seeking, updating the user interface. There's also, of course, adaptive streaming playback. You'll still need to manage that in the player as well. Everything from adaptive bitrate shifting, buffer management. And also retrieving and processing your CMS and configuration data for your player. So building it. We do know a thing or two about SSAI because we built our own SSAI service and platform at Viacom. It's currently known as Seamless. Let's talk about that. So goals of Seamless. Seamless VOD playback experience to the user, ability to quickly generate a contextual viewing experience on the fly. Something needs to be high performance, easy to implement on our players that we support, and it has to have the highest quality service and SLA. As many of you may know in video, 5 nines or 4 nines are a good target. All HLS delivery. Currently, that is the widest OTT reach at the moment, although we're considering some experiments with VP9. So some of our high-level requirements. No special client SDK needed for native HLS clients. We wanted to keep it simple. As long as the client is supporting HLS, we didn't want to burden our engineers and developers with that. No pre-transcoding of content required. The content needs to come off of our existing CDNs, prepackaged, and be able to be picked up there by our Seamless service. And support multiple existing CDNs. We do use a number of CDNs at Viacom, and we need to be able to support those and also easily shift traffic between them. And supporting existing ad servers through VAST. VAST is a very common format. Your ad server will need to support VAST for this to be able to work properly. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Supporting captions. We support WebVTT and captions through Sidecar. And all of this will be standard AES 128 HLS encryption, and then it's all delivered over HTTPS, something that is very important. Also supporting a wide number of platforms. So, we wanted to make the service configurable enough that the video delivery format as well, that it can support a number of platforms that we operate. So some features, ad tracking, content reporting, and beaconing is done server side. We have not ready ad transcoding logic. If the ad is not ready, serve a house ad back while the ad is transcoded and packaged. That lets the user have a, not just a blank experience. Support for discontinuity handling, so handling mixed frame rates and assets as well. So Seamless is cloud native. For scalability, maintainability, and continuous delivery, that's really the only way we could do this. Seamless was written cloud native from the ground up. It has a microservice architecture, and we're currently using a container model via Amazon ECS. So let's get into the architecture. In the middle, we have our blue SSAI service. We'll just follow the request flow from the OTT clients here. So the OTT client makes a request to our SSAI service. The SSAI service does a request to the VAST ad server on behalf of the client. If the ad server has an ad asset available for the client, we check if it's been transcoded and packaged. If not, it goes into a job queue where the ad asset transcoder packager handles all that and places it on ad asset origin. And then when you see the master and variant playlists, those are sent back to the client with the content TS segments and the ad asset TS segments that are stitched in. So it's important to note here that the content asset origin is completely separate from the ad asset origin because we are expecting that the content assets have already been transcoded and packaged. So that even allows us to use a couple different CDNs there if we'd like. Seamless supports standard IAB VMAP response. VMAP is an IAB standard. I'd encourage you to check out the IAB standards website. Basically, it contains the information about the ad response and timings and things like that. But it is a standard that is pretty well supported. So here's the playback sequence. We have our HLS player on the left and then Seamless on the right. It all starts with getting the master playlist request. Seamless returns the master media playlist manifests. Then the player asks again for the get media playlist manifest. And then finally, Seamless returns the stitched in media playlist. So you see ads, video, TS segments. Those are all stitched in. And here's a sort of a, here's what the Seamless media playlist output looks like. You see the in bold, the first section. That is the AES 128 key that comes from our CDN. The second, the last line there, is our TS segment. So that is also coming off of our CDN. And then in the next slide here, we have the continue TS segment as well, and then we have our ad insertion right here. So you see these 4 TS segments, those are coming from Seamless. So that is all returned back to the client where it's played back seamlessly. Video ad implementation, we support pre-roll, mid-roll, and post-roll, supporting server-side ad beaconing as well. We repackage and normalize the ad assets to HLS format. Ad assets are, these days have mostly been in MP4 H.264. The logic chooses the highest quality available ad asset. For ad issues as not ready or error skip ad pod, we might serve the default house ad. And at Viacom, we have a lot of content types that we support. VOD full episodes, VOD editorial playlists, VOD clips, which we would serve pre-rolls there. So, target devices and platforms. Next week, we're planning to launch on web first. So we're launching on the most popular browsers. followed by, we're evaluating the next OTT platforms to launch on. We do, as I said earlier, we do have a HLS everywhere strategy, so the leap is not going to be very big to go from where we are with seamless HLS on web to go to native. So your SSAI checklist. So whether you choose a build versus buy strategy, I put together a checklist of questions that you can ask yourself when you're going to either build this yourself or you're going to evaluate or buy something like this. So first, this is probably the most important, is to choose your video delivery format. What are your targeted platforms? On OTT, native app, desktop web, mobile web, connected TV, console. Frequently, that's going to dictate what your streaming delivery formats will be. So which adaptive streaming formats will you support? Will your platform support HLS or Dash? Is DRM required? DRM can make your implementation more complex. Also, integration with TV everywhere authentication, is that required? Transcoding strategies. Where is your content available? Can your packaged content be stitched into a playlist from your CDNs? How long does it take to publish new assets? What is the user experience if the ad asset is not ready? Do they get a house ad back? Do they get a no ad back? That's really up to you. How are you getting the assets delivered to the transcoder? Is that over HTTP? You might want to think about how your cloud architecture would be set up, or the vendors. So adaptive bitrate streaming profiles. If possible, align your ABR profiles. If they're not aligned, you may need to deal with discontinuities. What that means is that typically your ABR profiles from your content, like at Viacom, we have about 7 different renditions that we typically use. So we do align our ad asset processing to the same renditions. It's not absolutely required, but it can make your life easier. So HLS does have discontinuity markers, which you can put in your playlist to help you deal with something like that. Packaging strategies. Depending on your video delivery format, you'll need to choose either static or dynamic packaging on the fly. We're going with a static packaging strategy. In the past, we have used one of our CDNs does our dynamic packaging for HLS, but I think the industry is sort of heading towards statically packaged. Do your own research on that. This also couples fairly tightly with transcoding. You could probably reuse whatever you're using for your content packager if you're going the build route for your ad packager, but something to think about as well. So subtitles and captions. Most likely you'll need to support subtitles and captions. Is multi-language required? Are you compliant with the FCC closed caption rules? Has the content aired on television? If any of you are familiar with that rule, if the content is aired on television, that you must provide captions. And don't quote me on that because I'm not the FCC. If the caption crossed a break, how will caption stitching be managed? In our own solution, we do actually insert blanks for the caption stitching for the TS segments. And then that's for WebVTT captioning. And then for WebVTT sidecar, we actually sort of insert the timeline into the caption so it's played back along with the ad. Ad server. Does your ad server support VAST format? At this time, the newest spec is VAST 4.0, which does have better server-side support, mezzanine files, ready-to-serve assets. Really, the VAST 4.0 spec is sort of called the server-side ad insertion spec, but the IAB really dealt with a lot of the issues that were in the previous VAST specs, like, for example, varying renditions of low quality or not always something that's usable, like possibly like an FLV file. There's more information about VAST also on the IAB standards website. It's actually quite a good spec. It has including a little bit of architecture on how VAST works. So ad break cue points. How will you deliver your cue point and timeline metadata to the player? VMAP response, HLS manifest. How will your players parse the finalized stream with the addition of the ads? How should you manage breaks in display of captions? I discussed that a little bit. So analytics and reporting. What new or existing platforms do you need to connect to the server side? What do you need to report on KPIs? Server side or client side, you may very well have to do both. What about content reporting? Do you have specific requirements from brands or otherwise about content reporting? Is there a ad view reporting requirements where campaigns are requiring to report on ad views? Quality of service, it's last but not least, but that's also a very important aspect of delivery. So how do you report on QoE and QoS metrics as well? So, any questions? Sure. That is a good question. We have seen this help with ad blocking. So that is actually one of the, well, it's not why we're going web. We're going with web first due to sort of Flash end of life, but it does help with that situation.
On the ad blocking side, though, is it concerned that you're using a separate domain for the ad versus everything coming off of the same origin, so that it's going to be easier for ad blockers to spot that and say, okay, if everything makes content, we're going to block?
Yeah, I mean, changing the ad origin or where the assets are served off of is really not a big deal. That we could switch it to different domain or CDN, but yeah, I don't know. Just have to something to play with, I guess, right? Another question? Oh, sure, go for it.
So how do you guys notify the player when an ad break? How does the player know that's actually showing an ad versus this content? If you need to lock down, you get on control.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. So we send back in VMAP format from Seamless. We send that back to the player so the player is aware of where it stands in the timeline. No, actually, it's VAST format, so it has some timeline data in there. Yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with the ID3 tags, but yeah, it's actually very very supported in VMAP. I'm sorry if I can mix that with VAST. Sure. Sure. So at Viacom, some of our brands are using DRM, but most are not, given that it's owned and operated content. But I mean, I would ask you to just sort of, if you are going the DRM route, just to research the various SDKs that are available, and there's a whole entire sort of workflow that you have to implement, as well as decrypting on the client side.
Well, how do you manage between the clear content for the ad versus the DRM content for content?
Yeah, the ad content is in the clear. It's served off a different CDN. I actually haven't run across something like that because this isn't implemented for DRM. But I mean, I would guess that since the ad is in the clear, that's served off a different CDN, I imagine that your DRM content would be served from a different place. So I imagine it could be handled separately. Sure.
Is there an impact on the CPM when you move to a server side versus the client side, since the ad servers don't have the capability to interact directly with the end user device?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I wish I could answer that better, but we are going to start looking at that data once we launch. Yeah. Sure.
Do you use a time shift for your content in such case? Do you have any policies around time shifts for that?
Time shift. Time shift as in, oh, okay, like replaying the content or the ad. So like, I guess what you're saying is if you're like seeking the content, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's also handled as well because we have a very concise timeline that when we return the manifest back, we also have the accompanying VMAP document that has all the information about the timeline in there and captions as well. Sure.
Maybe for the context, is this for VOD in live or just for?
That's a good question. For now, this is for VOD and not for live yet, but we're still discussing that and evaluating if that is something that would be a possibility. Other questions? That's it? Thanks.